Thank you very much. Further debate, I recognize a member from Davenport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It really is a pleasure to stand here today and speak to this motion. When I was leaving the House this morning, my teenage daughters looked at me and said, "What's wrong? What are you doing?" Because I was dressed for work in a way they hadn't seen, I think, in a while. They only get to see it every couple of weeks now with the way the schedule is working, and of course, it is such a privilege to be able to be here in so many respects. I mean, first of all, because we are able to stand here in this House and represent our constituents the way that we've been elected to do so. But also, I think at this particular time, when so many people are experiencing such hardship, to be able to bring their voices and their stories here to this legislature and to I think also acknowledge that we have a privilege and that we are elected, that we are receiving a paycheck at a time when a lot of people are losing their employment and their jobs. I have to say at the start, I do find it very disconcerting, Mr. Speaker, to hear the government members' refusal to sit just one more day a week over the summer. We know, those of us in this House, and maybe those watching may not be aware of this, but that is the one day when private members' bills can be debated. And so it's actually an opportunity to look at what individual members of all sides are bringing forward. And we could all, I think, come to some understanding about bringing forward priority pieces of legislation that will actually be really important and do good work in this particular time. So I find it very disconcerting that the members opposite would not agree to that. I hope they'll reconsider. I think it would be very important that we sit as long as we possibly can in this legislature throughout the summer, as many days as possible. And I want to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, I mean, I really do believe every one of us here, I know how hard everybody has been working. I know how hard everyone has been working because we all get the calls. Our staff, let's hear it for our staff who are working. Thank you. Yes. From home. They're working from home as well. They're dealing with the most difficult casework, the most difficult calls, people who are really struggling, and it happens and it comes in waves, right? One week it's rent, it's a crisis in rent, and the next week it's where am I going to get food, and the next week it's my small business is closing, and it's just on, and we are all working, I think, so hard to come up with solutions that work for people in our communities. And I want to acknowledge that because I think it's really important to say we are all working really hard here together. I want to say as well that one of the things that I think we've all been doing, and I also appreciate as a local MPP how important this is speaking to all levels of government. Working with your municipal colleagues, working with your federal colleagues, of whatever political stripe, again, to try to do the best for our communities. How important has that been? Speaking with those levels of government, working to try to patch together sources of personal protective equipment, for example, which we have all, I know, been doing in our communities, when those stockpiles turned out to be somewhat fictional, when supplies expired or shipments were faulty. The work that has happened in our communities to try to patch together solutions has been tremendous. Literally, in my community, we are bringing gloves from one centre to a food bank, and we're organizing volunteers to do those things. And I know that's happening everywhere, just to make sure that those supplies get there, because that's all that really matters. We've been working with small businesses, the very heart of our communities, to signal to the provincial and federal governments that the current programs that are being offered are failing. They are failing. And they are faulty. They are not going to work. And yesterday, I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I spoke with my MP, who's a government MP, and I actually raised these issues along with my city councillor, who happens to be the Deputy Mayor of Toronto. We raised some of these issues around constant concerns about whether or not this program to provide rent relief, but through the opt-in of landlords, how this could possibly work, because we've heard from BIAs, we've heard from chambers, we've heard from small businesses directly that this is not working. And the response we got was, well, we're taking a wait-and-see approach. And the response, and then she added, And we're looking, at people like what Rod Phillips said. It's the same sort of thing. We're just going to take a wait-and-see approach. It's just opened up. We'll see. And we're saying, no, everybody, don't listen to us. Listen to them if you have to. They're telling us it's not working. They're not applying. It's a failure. Do something else. And we cannot afford to wait. I mean, what are we waiting for? Because I can tell you that the eviction signs are going up. They're going up across my riding. Every day there are new eviction signs going up on businesses, on storefronts. And I get the alarmed calls not just from the business owners, but from the community members. I want to mention DeSoto's on St. Clair West or Dave's. I want to talk about Lansdowne Cone, which is a ice cream place, great little ice cream joint on Lansdowne. They're trying really hard to work on a solution with their landlord. They're not just a great ice cream spot, by the way, but they provide important employment opportunities for youth who face other kinds of obstacles to employment. So they do great things in our community. They're operating, as of today, I think, again, temporarily until June 1st. They're really hoping they can come up with a solution. Thank goodness that they were able to reopen, but other businesses are reopening, and then they're getting an eviction notice on the door, and they are closed again. And they have barely had a chance. So we cannot wait. We cannot afford to wait for government to decide that now is the time when already half of the businesses in our communities have shut down. And I can tell you that's what's going to happen in large parts of this city of Toronto. It's very difficult, Mr. Speaker, because these are our community members, they're our neighbours. They're the little corner stores that you get used to going to. They're the pubs that everybody comes together for their community association nights. Like these are the hearts of our community. We say that all the time. It sounds so cliche, but it is so true, and it's also what makes our community so very distinct. So it's very important. And so honestly, if we could work here every single day, I'd be happy to. I think I look around and I think we'd all do that. Oh boy, would we. And I'm sure all of you would too. I think you would. So I don't understand what the resistance is to having that extra day. I think it's really important. I want to tell you the kinds of people who expect us to come and work that extra day. At the Oasis Dufferin Community Centre, it's called a community centre, but it's really a community food centre in my community on Dufferin, north of Bloor. And in that, it's a food bank. It's really operating solely as a food bank right now. The call goes out every day for what they need. They need things like diapers, because there's been babies born in the neighbourhoods, newborns, and people need newborn diapers. The number of families lining up has become a traffic issue in our community. 20 to 30 new families a week accessing this one little tiny food bank in my neighbourhood. So this is very much an urgent issue. And I hear the words of hope, and I tell you, honestly, I really am an optimist. I really do hope. Boy, do I hope that we get through this. But I think we're just seeing the beginning of it. And I think if we don't act very, very quickly and in profound ways, in bold ways, we are not going to get through this. Those families are definitely not going to get through this. They want more than words, they want action. And so what I don't want to do, I'll tell you what I don't want to do, is stand here and debate bills that not only don't focus on the issues that we're facing today, but also bills like the housing bill that this government rushed through shamefully, that is actually going to make it easier to evict tenants. Shameful. I am astonished that would be so. I was actually quite shocked when I heard that yesterday. I could not believe that would have made its way into this House at this moment, when tenants in my riding are ending up homeless, when families are losing their homes because they've lost their jobs because of this pandemic, that we would consider making it easier for landlords to evict tenants. That is shameful. You should be extending the moratorium on evictions. You should be providing direct relief to those tenants. One of the things that I have been hearing a lot over the last little while, Mr. Speaker, is that it is not enough to come back to quote-unquote normal without learning from this current situation. And I want to take us there for a moment, and I'll tell you why. The COVID-19 situation has pulled back the curtain in many areas for us to see and understand some of the inequities that exist in our communities that perhaps have never been as obvious as they are now. And I'll tell you, as the education critic, I have looked specifically at education and where those inequities have been revealed, because they were always there. They were always there, but now they have become more obvious, and we cannot look back. We have to think now about how we are going to address those going forward. So when our students and our staff, for example, return to school, perhaps in September, in whatever way that happens, and I mentioned this today in an opinion piece that was published, and I've raised this with the minister as well. We need to, yes, deal with the nuts and bolts of the issues, but we also have to look back and acknowledge the inequities that have been revealed in this system, the underfunding, the understaffing, the massive classrooms, the capital backlogs, the impact that has on different communities. And we have to acknowledge that the system wasn't working well for everyone. So if we're going to go back, let's talk not just about the nuts and the bolts, let's talk about how we do better. So I think, very sadly, the COVID-19 has revealed, and in the most heartbreaking and devastating way, an issue that we've raised repeatedly in this House over many years, but certainly today, my colleagues and I, which is the failure of our long-term care system. And let's face it, our failures just generally in terms of taking care of seniors, of vulnerable people. And let's also acknowledge that this was a system that was privatized under the Harris government. Privatization was expanded extensively under the Harris government. The next government in power failed dramatically to do anything to fix it. And now a system that under this current government, and I heard the minister, and I've heard others here today say numerous times, we couldn't have seen what was coming. Oh my goodness, we didn't know. COVID-19, a pandemic like we've never seen. I agree with you there. But I'll tell you, we could have been more prepared. We could have been more prepared. And I tell you, every single day I feel guilt as just a member of this society, of our community, for the fact that we did not prepare to protect those people in those homes. It is shocking. It is appalling. But you know what? You shouldn't be shocked that we weren't prepared, because you should have known. Because everybody here in this House was warned. If you were elected in the last election, this was discussed. If you've been around in this province for the last 30 years at some point, this issue has been raised. Okay? I was a researcher in the early 2000s, and one of the areas I covered was healthcare, and I was looking at long-term care inspections and nursing home inspections. And let me tell you, these exact issues were raised then. And they are raised here again, and to say that there's been an attempt to fix this is absurd, when at the same time you have reduced the number of inspections so dramatically. So, Mr. Speaker, I raise that, and I digress a little, because this legislation would allow us to move forward the debate on Bill 175, which is an act to amend, I think it's called an act to amend various acts respecting home care and community services. And I tell you, if there was ever an issue that we should be taking a deep breath and looking at real closely in relation to the lessons of this pandemic, it is that legislation. So this is not government as usual, okay? I don't think I have to tell any of you that. We all know that. So, for goodness sake, let's learn from what is happening right now. Vermin in our long-term care facilities. People reusing needles. Staff who feel like they can't access, they shouldn't take protective equipment or supplies because they're so worried about budgetary restrictions. We all, I think, know, if it wasn't clear why all of those workers and all of those experts and us in the opposition and many others had been saying for years and years and years that it was a problem that the staff in long-term care facilities and in the community sector and in home care were paid so little and didn't have, good, strong workplace protection, etc., that why that would be a problem in the end. It wasn't just about, being decent, paying somebody a decent wage, giving them a decent job, all those, general protections that workers should have. But it's also about the fact that the impact, as we're seeing now, is that people have to work in multiple locations to patch together a living. And that the industry, and particularly the for-profit side of this industry, by the way, again, something that was expanded dramatically under the Harris regime, and in fact was expanded, and now that former premier is profiting quite immensely from it, I gather. So you've got a for-profit industry that is profiting from these centres where we have vermin running rampant, where staff are worried about budget constraints and not using equipment. It's astonishing. It makes me very emotional. I find it very upsetting, and I'm sure a lot of us do here. 700 people are dead. 700 people are dead in our long-term care homes alone. And I think that's just the residents. I don't think that number even includes the staff. I might be wrong. So, and we are just seeing the tip of this, I believe. And I said it this morning, but I really do. I remember early on, and I felt kind of bad saying it because it sounded so doom and gloom, but we saw what was coming. It was going to be a massacre in those facilities of the aged, of the vulnerable. So don't say that the alarms weren't up. Those flags were raised. And that is why we need a full and independent public inquiry. And my colleague pointed this out brilliantly. SARS, Walkerton, Ipperwash. My friends, a public inquiry is going to happen. The question is whether or not you are going to be brave enough to do it yourselves. Because if it doesn't happen under this government, it will happen under the next government. My goodness, I hope it is us and we get to do that. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to share with you just I have a few more minutes, a letter that I shared this morning, and I mentioned it when I was asking in question period the Minister of Long-Term Care why she wasn't resigning. And I'll tell you, again, when I was a researcher years and years ago, I remember very clearly a minister under the Harris government years stepped down. He resigned. He resigned. It was Bob Runciman, fine member of this House. And Bob Runciman resigned. He was Solicitor General. And he resigned because, I think it was in the throne speech, the name of a young offender was written into the throne speech and therefore read out. And the Solicitor General under that government stepped down over that. Can you imagine? It seems almost absurd in this current context. It seems like such a small matter. It isn't, by the way. It's a very significant thing. But you know what? It is one of those things that as elected officials, and certainly as cabinet members, to take responsibility, to say the buck stops here, to be accountable, it's so critical. And it's critical to the people of Ontario to know that you're taking it that seriously, that there is accountability, that there is transparency. It's absolutely essential. And I was very disappointed it didn't happen here. And I have this letter that I sent on April 28th, which is almost exactly 1 month ago, and I have not yet received a response. And in it, this was a month ago, so I listed out a whole bunch of examples of people who have contacted me. I was going to read it out. I don't think I have time now. But, a resident whose 95-year-old father had contracted COVID-19 at Monshong Home for the Aged, a home that tried and failed to get personal protective equipment from authorities before the outbreak and only received it after making the issue public, that family. I've also heard from so many, numerous families, I know we all have, who are concerned about ongoing issues, about the lack of testing, about the lack of protective equipment, about how late the government waited to stop the movement of staff between facilities and the continuation of the movement of staff who are contract workers. We need to do better. We need to work here for that extra day because the people of this province expect us to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Further debate, recognize